So we're here to talk about Cognos upgrades. So I guess before we get started, curious, is anyone in the room on Cognos 11 live in production already? Okay, good. You're all in the right room. You are? Sandbox, okay. Okay. Nothing's running, okay. You're still in the right room then. So how many people are on 10.2.2? Just out of curiosity. Okay. So a lot of you, 10.2.1? Anyone on 8? Any of the versions of 8? On 8, okay. Anything older than that? Series 7, yeah. Going way back, right? So, well, I guess curiously, not to point you out, but so I'll open it up to the room then. What has been the reason that you have not upgraded anyone?
Budget constraint.
Budget constraint. And so, to parlay off of that, right? In the past, these upgrades have been big projects. In fact, I was going to show a picture. I'm actually climbing Mount Aconcagua later this year, and so I've been planning for it for probably 3 or 4 months already. It's in December, but it got me thinking a lot about the Cognos upgrades. You know, because when you're going and it's in Argentina, it's like almost 23,000 feet. So when I'm doing this, I have to plan for, workouts, and I'm leading a group of people up the mountain as well. So I have to plan workout, general equipment, everyone's personal equipment, all of the clothes, all of the what-if scenarios, what happens if there's a blizzard, But it's kind of like that in the Cognos upgrades, or it has in the past, right? You almost need a project plan just to put together the project plan, which is kind of why it's, so many people have not kept up actively with these Cognos upgrades. Because they're costly, they're timely, and it just wasn't easy. So on that note, that's kind of why this approach was developed, really to give Cognos customers a repeatable, easy way to do these upgrades, to transform it from these projects into a task-oriented, task-oriented project where it's a plug and play. So interesting enough, we did a poll of about 400, 500 Cognos customers, and basically asking them what keeps you up at night about the upgrade, right? What is your biggest challenge? And I'm going off some memory here, but I think 37% of the recipients said managing the upgrade. I think we'll say 30-ish% said testing. And then some other ones, determining ROI was I think one of the least ones, and I'll show it when we get to that point. So, in fact, I'm going to. That's all right.
Do you want your slide?
Yeah, I'm gonna at least. Did you get it?
No, I got the second one I tested. So sorry.
Okay, no problem. No problem. So I'm going to show this. I don't know if anybody will be able to see it. Here, let's see. Well, I guess we're almost there. So you do have it?
Yep.
Okay. This will be much easier.
You can act it out. You could do an interpretive dance.
Yeah. Yes. The upgrades are going to be easier than getting your PowerPoint to work in a conference. So kind of talked a little bit about why we're here. So here's the poll that I was talking about. I'll let you guys digest it. I think it's kind of interesting to see what the peers find is the biggest challenges. So just out of curiosity for this room, raise your hand if you think that managing the migration out of at least these 5 will be your biggest challenge. So not too many. What about resolving errors post-testing? So performing root cause analysis, those. So a couple hands. Determining ROI associated with the upgrade. Nobody there. Automating the testing and validation. A couple more hands there. And then the final one, organizing and prioritizing the content. Okay, so interesting to see. So ultimately, it's all about Cognos upgrade success, right? And not just the success of this upgrade, but setting yourselves up for the future success of all of the upgrades, which is even more important today than it's ever been before. And most notably, if you haven't heard, it's IBM switched their release methodology to the rapid release. And they're now going to be doing 4 releases, 1 a quarter, and only supporting 2 releases back, which will force people to upgrade twice a year. Now, you know, for some of you that haven't upgraded for a while because it was difficult, I can see you look and think, oh, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. But we're going to have to, and this is one of the main reasons why it's important really to develop this efficient approach. So when we talk about upgrade success, it's all about creating efficiency. It's about automating things in the upgrade process that you can, but it's also about managing the quality and accuracy of the data. Knowing or being assured that when you upgrade and go live in production, that your reports aren't breaking, that there's not going to be massive user interruptions, that your system's going to be able to handle, the new environment. Of course, it's also about platform performance. More so than ever before, the users have demanded high-performing platforms. Heard from somebody I spoke to who had a user say, "Well, why can't you guys just make this run as fast as like Google?" But that's the expectations that people are getting now, right? They've gone through the roof in the last 5 to 6 years, and we can either ignore them and they'll go somewhere else, or we can continuously strive to hit those demands. It's also about time to market. Again, an important one. One, because we don't want these upgrades to go on indefinitely. But 2, if they're going to be happening twice a year, we need a quick time to market. Otherwise, we don't want to be in situations where we just finished the last upgrade and now we have to start the next upgrade. Management control of the whole process and visibility into really what everyone in the upgrade is working on, how long it will take before you can go live, all of those. And then finally, engage users, because that's what it's all about. If they're not using Cognos, if our end users aren't using Cognos, it's going to go away. And people aren't going to be engaged unless we do have a quick time to market, unless we do have a high-performing platform, unless the quality and accuracy of the data is correct. And really the ways that we can get there are by creating efficiencies and managing that entire process. So the recommended best practice upgrade methodology is a 5-step process. And the first one really is preparing and assessing the environment, narrowing the scope, analyzing the impact, repairing what's broken, and then, of course, the upgrading of the production environment and go live. So for this example, we're going to do 10.2.2 environment, 5,000 reports, and upgrading to the latest version of Cognos. But the story is going to be the same regardless of your starting or ending point. So when we start to look at the prepare and assess stage, of course you want to set up your infrastructure in a sandbox. Probably common sense for most of you, but you want to make sure that it has adequate infrastructure to be able to simulate as close as possible to your production environment. Set up infrastructure for Motio, CI, and report card, and we'll talk about how those fit into the picture coming up. And then you want to start assessing the current production. And the questions we should all ask ourselves as we start to assess this environment is, how many reports do I have? There is an object count query that can give you the exact number. And to this date, I've never had anybody come within, I think, 15 or 20% of what their actual report numbers were, which is kind of interesting. So regardless if you're doing an upgrade or not, I think it's a really good thing to run and to know, because it gives you a breakdown of every object in your content store, which is a very helpful thing to know what's in there. Other questions you want to answer though, how many reports are valid and will run? Of course, every report that's associated with the upgrade has some type of cost in it. So if a report isn't running now and it's not valid and there's no support tickets, is it really something we want to upgrade? Is it really an active report? Probably not, right? But you can always ask the end users, and it really starts to allow us to ask these questions. But you also want to know how many reports have not recently been used. Again, if it hasn't ran in 12 months, 13 months, whatever time parameter, thought process is, again, is it really an active report that should be upgraded? Well, either we can make that decision, or likely you at least want to coordinate with the business users. And then how many reports are just copies of each other? Duplicate reports can clutter the environment. So curious, does anybody do any type of scoping before upgrades currently? Or is kind of the thought process just upgrade everything, or has anybody thought about it yet?
We need to go through the whole scope process, like what to be migrated, what not to be migrated, and in which phase we need to migrate. Like folder project-wise, we need to migrate on which part of that project goes priority with that, etc.
Makes sense. So how did you guys go through that process?
So first of all, we interact with the business and define the strategy, what their criticality.
Mm-hmm. So they gave you a list of, hey, here's our most important reports, and goes on down. Makes sense. So how can you assess? So a couple quick, easy ways to assess. Report card does allow you to return duplicate reports. And I think most of them are probably in PyPro here. But being able to do the mass validations, being able to gain insight into most used, most ran reports, those types of things should certainly be helpful in this process. And then, of course, the outcome of this assessment phase should lead to that scoping where you coordinate with the business. You're either deleting reports, marking them, as out of scope, archiving them, or whatever is decided. So step 2. So we have the 10.2.2 environment and the production environment with 5,000 reports. The first thing we're going to do is connect Motio CI to the production environment. And this is a critical stage or point to do this first. And I'll get into that more coming up. The second thing you want to do is freeze production. Now I know that you can't actually freeze production for a day, and probably much less a week or 2 weeks or however long it takes to do the upgrade. But one of the reasons why it's so important to connect Motio CI to your production at the start of this process is while you're upgrading, it can help keep your environments in sync. So 3 weeks, go down the road, you're working. Well, of course, anything that's been changed in production, you want to be able to know that so that you can keep your sandbox in sync so that, again, that they're mirroring each other. Then, once you've connected to your CI instance to your production, you want to copy that instance over to your sandbox. Quick note, I would say make sure you turn off all the schedules, especially if there's my folder schedules. Those can be turned off en masse with PyPro. Otherwise, your users are going to be getting multiple emails. And then you want to connect your CI instance to the sandbox as well. And you've already assessed, so at this point, whatever was decided between the business and IT, you can start implementing and narrowing that scope before you start the actual upgrade process. So as we set up this environment in the sandbox, part of it is we want to make this a very manageable process. So to do so, we recommend breaking the reports into some type of logical mechanism. Probably you have ideas in your own environment of how that would make sense. It could be by folders, packages, departments. Hey, here's HR's reports, here's finance, etc. But there's probably, for most of you guys, probably a way that you could easily do that. Kind of best practice, again, keep reports between 1 and 300. It's going to allow you to do it in more bite-sized chunks and keep it, again, more manageable. So once you have everything organized, that's when you want to start setting up the test cases. And there's 3 really recommended ones, and I'll add a 4th here. So it's value stability. That's going to be the catch-all for data validation. And it will do that in multiple ways to give you a good picture. Formatting stability, so the look and feel, are tables moving, columns moving, are things shifting around, whatever the case. Again, that's kind of the catch-all. Performance stability, most people expect that overall the performance of the environment should increase after an upgrade, but it's not always the case on every report. So it's important to monitor those so you're aware when it starts to degrade because of the upgrade. And I'll add a 4th there. If you do have sensitive information on certain reports, hey, maybe there's salary reports on for a certain HR report. Well, of course, you don't want that getting out to everybody in the organization. Somebody's head's probably going to roll if it does. So you can also set up a security stability. Again, nothing should change on security as part of that upgrade, but it can be generated en masse. And, well, lots of things change that shouldn't change sometimes as part of the upgrade. So it's not a bad one to do if you have some sensitive reports. So then, as you start going, any report that you're not gonna be upgrading, you can label it as out of scope and disable the test case. So we've narrowed the scope. Now we've went from 5,000 to 3,000 reports. We're gonna go ahead and run the baseline in CI, and that's gonna essentially make sure that everything's passing those test cases before we do the upgrade, which they should be. Once we've done that, you're going to upgrade using IBM standard methodology. Then we're going to kick off the test cases again. Probably again as a best practice, I'd recommend kicking those off overnight, over the weekend. But at some point, you don't want to be sitting there watching it, because if it is 200 reports, it's going to take longer than a couple minutes to run. So once you've ran those test cases, you're going to evaluate the outcome and estimation of workload. So we ran the test cases on 3,000 reports. 200 reports come back as failing. So pretty helpful thing to know as we look to see how can we go live. So, well, actually, I'll back up here too. So, of course, it's helpful to know 200 reports have to be worked on, but to really bring it full picture too, because the testing is a helpful component. But even imagine as a report developer, if I get, I guess in this scenario, 200 reports, I can pull that list up and see all 200 reports. I can see which test case they're failing. Are they failing formatting stability? Are they failing the data validation or the output stability? Which again, as a developer, if I pull up the first one and I see, hey, it's failing data stability. Well, now I know somewhere between that 10 and 11, the data's different, which is a pretty helpful thing to know as a developer when I try and execute the root cause analysis. But to take it that step further, I now can see that. I pull it up, it's failing data values. I can also pull it up on a PDF in 10.2 or whatever environment, and 11, and it will actually circle which cells are failing that data validation. So again, in the life of the developer, as I start to fix this, I know which reports are failing, what's failing in those reports, and where in those reports they're failing, which will make that root cause analysis very quick and seamless as you start the repair process. Not to jump ahead of myself, but when you had those 200 test cases that came back as failing, you'll see that you'll get a variety of different types of messages, but most of them are going to be either, something's failing, maybe it's an okay change, so you can reset the baseline. Maybe something is different or off, but it's actually a better change. Well, of course, we can accept it. So if something's failed and it does need to be worked on, we'll fix it. We'll label it as repaired and put it in the appropriate folder. And same process regardless of really what error is failing. So once you've gotten these results, 200 reports are failing, it starts to become very easy if people ask, well, when's this upgrade going to be done? Because you can use an estimation of how long you think it will take for each report to fix. Let's just say an hour for this example. So 200 work hours divided, if you have 3 people on it, you can do the math. But it starts to make this process much more of a repeatable process, predictable. And so maybe by the time you get to the next upgrade, you have a very good idea of the resources and timeframes it will take before you even start this. So step 4, the repair. So again, we want to make sure that we've synced the environment, and when we do so, you can automatically kick off all the test cases for any reports that have been changed since we started the upgrade process. You want to start repairing the report test. Of course, once you repair it, again, you can automatically kick off all the test cases to make sure that your changes did in fact make, I guess, the recommended, or that they're passing the test cases. But as you go through this, there are reports available out of CI that can give you instant insight really into the progress of the upgrade. So going along that earlier statement, if a manager, director, whoever, comes to the Cognos team and says, oh, when's this report going to be done? You really don't have to have those update meetings or whatnot. They can get a variety of reports generated to them, via email that will give them what needs to be worked on, how it's been divvied up, what's already been worked on, but really that full picture. So we fixed everything now, and it's the Saturday go live moment. So before you actually go live, as a sanity check, not a bad idea just to run that baseline on production, just to make sure, again, everything's working the way we thought it should, or think it should. Then you want to follow the standard procedure to upgrade the production environment. So now those 200 reports, maybe it's 175 that we've labeled as repaired in the CI instance in the sandbox. Now we want to promote just those reports that we've repaired into the production environment, because of course we would expect them to break again since the environment's mirroring. So we're going to deploy those in an automated fashion. Actually, as you deploy them, it will automatically kick off those test cases in the production environment so that, again, you can make sure that it's working the way it's supposed to be. If something out of those, let's say 175 reports isn't, you can pick on a granular level that safety net, and if it's just one report for some reason that's giving you all kinds of issue, keep the other 174 in there, just roll back that one report, no interruption on the end users, and you can work on that as a one-off. So upgrade production, you're at the top of the mountain, you finish the project, time to celebrate, but well, I guess before I get into the key benefits of this approach really, quick analysis and setting of the scope, and really what that is it's a mini health check, right? It's keeping the environment clean, immediate insight on workload, lower time, lead time in test efforts. Of course, all the testing is automated, which should help pretty dramatically bring down the time to market on these upgrades. That coupled with the fact that as you do root cause analysis, it should be pretty easy. Lower freeze time of production, and then really a framework to manage the entire project. So what happens again? What happens in 2 months when the latest, greatest release is released? Time to start the process again. However, and I kind of mentioned IBM's rapid release. However, now you can reuse your existing investment because you set up these test cases in that sandbox. You set up the organized structure in the sandbox. So it's not something you have to do again. It's easily reusable. So no more mountains. When you get to these upgrades, you don't have to think about putting together huge project plans because it's became much more of a repeatable process. So instead of following, on that next upgrade, the kind of the 5 steps we outlined, when it comes to the rapid release in 3, 4, 5 months when you upgrade that second time, install the update, kick off the test cases, verify, and of course, since we've done this process before, you'd expect that the amount of failures would pretty dramatically decrease. and then of course update the production environment. But if you've noticed, and you might want to do some scoping maybe once every 12 months, 24 months, or whatever you deem is appropriate, but we're able to cut out most of that first step. And second step, really, I guess the first part of the first step, setting up the infrastructure we'll still need. But we're able to cut off a lot of that initial project setup time. So wanted to kind of at least give you a little bit of a look and feel. I know we're running a little bit shorter in time. Ooh, and in fact, I don't know if I'll be able to show you guys or not. Well, I don't know, because I didn't email these over. I don't know if it'll be worthwhile, if everybody will be able to see, or if you guys want to see. If it'll be probably kind of small. Use your imagination. I can send you a link afterwards. But I think, can you guys see that at all in the back, or is it really, really small?
Can you send a link out later?
I'll send the link. Essentially what it goes over is a lot of the steps in the process that we just showed in CI. So it shows you what it looks like to organize the content, what it looks like to run those baselines, what the results of the baselines look like. Even the process in the sense that, okay, we have a failed report, how do we fix it? So that root cause analysis. So it kind of walks through various stages of that. So I was going to show those. Let me go. I had one last one. So as opposed to showing those, I kind of want to open it up to you guys and just hear anything. Yes, go ahead.
I had a question for you. I heard you mention during the kind of rundown you were doing PI and CI.
Yes.
But on your initial slide, you'd also mentioned report card. So how does report card integrate into that process, and what does it buy me that CI doesn't?
Good question. So report card really gives you two things in the upgrade that probably per the environment and per the company, it's going to depend on the importance. The first one is duplicate reports. It can go through and show you pretty intelligently, here are all the reports that are similar. It will even give you how similar they are. It will also show you the success and failure rate of those. So let's just say you have 5 reports that pull up that are similar. Well, if the first report has 1,000 executions and 980 of them succeeded, and maybe the second one has 50 executions, 30 failed, so on and so forth, it starts becoming pretty easy to decide, well, maybe we should keep the first one and archive, delete, get rid of, or whatever the scenario is for the fourth one. The other one would be in report card is the stress and load testing. So if you're doing all new infrastructure, you're adding a bunch more users, maybe if there's going to be changes that you think could affect Cognos' capacity and you want to make sure and measure those before you go live, the stress and load testing can give you good visibility into how the environment will perform in whatever set future state. Good question. What other questions do you guys have?
What's the difference between Lifecycle Manager and Motio CI?
Good question. So the Lifecycle Manager, who's used Lifecycle Manager? Okay. Who used Lifecycle Manager and really likes it?
I've heard it was better with this release, but that's all I've heard.
So I know development has been curtailed pretty dramatically. To put it in perspective, IBM Global Consultants, when they help customers with upgrades, they use CI. And the reason is Lifecycle Manager has issues with some of the prompts, and I apologize, I'm not an expert on Lifecycle Manager, but to give you some of the things that I'm hearing. It's more of a one user per type of solution. I think it gets installed on the desktop, so if you have multiple people working on a project or upgrade, it kind of becomes hard to coordinate and see what other people are doing. Lifecycle Manager can validate. Again, if you have a group of reports, let's say 100 or 200, 300, and it fails, I've heard that it won't keep running, all of it. So you can imagine, hey, I kick them off over the weekend, fails on the first one, come back, crap, what do? Have to rerun it, right? Whereas, of course, CI will continue on that track. But CI is more than really just testing, right? It's a lifecycle tool for Cognos. And what it really does is, beyond the testing, it gives you that framework for how to manage the upgrade, how to make it that repeatable task, and really how to streamline not just the upgrades, but even every day. That same story with the root cause analysis, it's pretty applicable to every day. Hey, I'm a developer. I get a support ticket from production from a user saying, hey, I need this report fixed. Well, what do? The first thing we do is we do, the root cause analysis. What's changed on this report? Why isn't it was working? Why isn't it working now? Well, again, that ability to pull those reports up on the side by side and see, what's wrong and where it's wrong. And then, even going through that process, whether it's automating the deployments or even having, really that safety net so that if things do go wrong, you can always roll back. But there are a lot of functional differences. I do have a list that I could probably get out to you, but those are a couple of them.
CI is a free download?
Sure. One for the next 2 minutes, limited time only. Takes 10 minutes to download though, especially on this internet. Go ahead.
So this runs on a server. What does it take to run this? I'm sure it's a web server or some kind of database repository of some kind?
Correct. So CI, because every time you ever make a change in Cognos, whether it's part of the upgrade or every day, it captures that change, which is what gives you your baselines for testing, or it gives you those rollback capabilities. So in an effort not to impact performance on Cognos, it does come with its own database and server. So it's stored there so that you're not bloating the content store. But it should be any standard database server, anything that you guys have, unless it's something that's not seen in the industry hardly at all, it will support that, and it doesn't take a whole bunch of memory. Again, I can get you the actual system requirements, but it's not too large.
So one installation would take care of, let's say, dev QA prod, or say?
Yes, it's a one-to-many. So once you have it installed, you could connect it to 10 environments or one environment.
Does it use any content or data store or no?
So the question was, does it store any?
Or does it connect to content audit store? Basically, it contains all the audit information, what report has been changed, what has been done, most of what is not running for it.
So you're talking. So there's kind of two questions, sort of. So the first so I heard the second part of the question was about the audit, and the first is about the storage. So any object in Cognos, so reports, security, anything that exists, right? There's an object for it. Anytime that's changed, somewhere in the software, there's an agent that recognizes that change, and basically what it does is it takes a snapshot of that and stores it into the CI database. So that's how it's not clogging up, bloating up your content store. So as opposed to saving it in the history or whatever in the content store, where eventually that will impact performance, that's why it stores it in the database. In regards to trying to gain visibility into the metrics, like what you were saying on the second part, so PyPro does allow you to see, when the last run times are, some of those types of things within the audit database. So typically it tends to be CI is more the lifecycle tool if you're trying to figure out the differences. CI is versioning, deployment, testing, BI over BI type things, whereas Pi is more of like the Swiss Army knife of Cognos. Hey, I'm an administrator, something's hard to do, or I have to do it a whole bunch. Chances are, if you're finding yourself in that scenario, Pi's going to be able to help you. So think mass update of schedules, search and replace type capabilities, security, those types. What other questions? I think I might have time for one more question before I get kicked off here.
A question that came up in an earlier session.
Yes.
With doing the mass updates with PI.
Yes.
Is turning a C11 report interactive property one of those things that you can update? If you don't know, I'll find out otherwise. I just thought I'd throw it out. 'Cause it came up.
Do you know where, does that exist in the XML?
I don't believe so. I don't think it's in the report spec. I'm not sure where it's.
I'm gonna have to get back to you. That's a firm maybe. However, I appreciate the question because it reminded me to mention this as well. Anyone out there have Query Studio reports? A little bit. So if you have a lot of them, like a whole bunch. So IBM's process in the native one for converting it, it's not bad. It's pretty good. But it's a one at a time type of thing. So one of the panels in PyPro can basically do that in mass. So if you have 1,000 Query Studio reports and you don't want to click through 1,000 times, you can click once and they're all updated. But it should be important to note too that a Query Studio report might not always translate over to the same type of report that what you were originally looking for, right? So it's probably still worth reviewing them and seeing, hey, is this still satisfying what we need it to do? Any other questions before I get thrown off? I guess not. Well, I appreciate everyone's time and yeah.
Send out the link.
Yes.